I have got an absolute bumper of an episode for you today, and I've got a little bit of giddy, groupie fever because I'm with some incredible ladies. The first ever female Metropolitan Mayor is in the virtual room. Mayor Tracy Brabin, welcome. Every time I'm in your presence, I just get this whole buzz of excitement because you've got this vibe and aura of positivity, of ambition, and just a pure delight. But welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to join this incredible episode. Deputy Mayor Lowe, you and I go way back. We've done a podcast together, didn't we? During the independent review and sharing our reflections of the journey that we went on together. But as a woman who is always on the rise and gone to a bigger and huge portfolio of being the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime here in West Yorkshire, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that both of you are really, really busy, but as your first ever inclusivity champion, I could not do an episode and kick off this series without talking to you two incredible ladies. So thank you for taking the time to come and talk to me today. Now, when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking, what could we talk about? And there is so much we could talk about because you've both had two incredible, diverse, and really fascinating journeys, haven't you, to get to the roles that you're in today. But for those people that have not been under a rock, Mayor Brabin, please tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the chair that you're sitting in today.
Blimey, Fatima, firstly, thank you so much for setting up this podcast. What an absolutely brilliant idea. And I can't wait to see who else you get on, because I know you've got an amazing schedule of some extraordinary people. So I'm very honoured and flattered to be here with my good friend and Deputy Mayor, the amazing Alison Lowe. So, well, Fatima, I grew up in Batley with my sister and my mum and dad in a council flat in Howden Clough. Always wanted to be an actor, and first in my family to go to university. Didn't know anything about drama school, so I did drama at uni, and then started my career in a community theatre and going into schools, doing plays. We did my first ever show was about road safety, which is quite ironic given what we're doing now, Alison and I, with Vision Zero. I was Countess Crash Barrier. I was excellent, I think, with a big cone on my head. And because I didn't know anybody and we had no money, it took me ages to get an agent. I was with a co-op for 5 years, but then I got an amazing job playing David Jason's girlfriend in a series called A Bit of a Do, because they wanted a really authentic Yorkshire woman who had, rough edges. I definitely had those. And I developed a career over 3 decades as a freelancer. When I had my girls, I've always been interested in writing. I did an MA in screenwriting, and I widened out my creative career to becoming a writer as well. I didn't anticipate becoming a politician, but as an actor and writer, I always supported, and I've always been a member of the Labour Party, and I supported candidates and MPs and councillors as well, candidates, going door knocking with them. Because when you've been on the telly, and I was in Coronation Street for a few years, when you've been on the telly, if you go to a campaigning session, you're more likely to get press because you've just got a bit of a face. And I campaigned with Jo Cox. I met her. She was campaigning in my hometown. Blown away. My first political speech, actually, she asked me to speak at her fundraiser at the Cash in Cleckheaton. I was absolutely terrified because I was so used to saying other people's lines. I had to think of what I wanted to say. And then the awful tragedy in Burstall when she was murdered. I went to the funeral and I offered help. What could I do? And one of her friends said, "Do you want to be an MP?" Of course, it wasn't a given, and there was, I think, 70 people stood in that seat because the other major parties had stood to one side. I became the MP. I was an MP for 5 years, 4 of which I was on the shadow front bench. And then we were talking about devolution, and I was looking around to support a woman. We need a woman mayor. They're all men. We need women at the top table. And I realised, Fatima, I had to walk the walk, not talk the talk. And so I threw my hat in the ring. And here we are. We campaigned during the election through COVID, and it was pretty tough, actually. Every call, the team who were calling, you know, we'd say, the first thing we'd say is, how are you and your family? Because there's no point ringing people up and going, vote Labour, when people are going through such awful times and losing businesses and loved ones and so on. So that was really hard, that campaign. But we're here now. I'm 2.5 years in. I hope that people feel that I've done a good job, and I definitely am surrounded by the most extraordinary people. You, Fatima, have brought some extraordinary energy to inclusivity and equality. And Alison, you know, right from the start, delivering at speed on our shared agenda, particularly around safety of women and girls.
I mean, you know, Alison is a lady that needs no introduction, but just reflecting on what you've just said, I mean, there were a few things that really stood out to me, and I've heard this from quite a few of the most inspirational women, Michelle Obama included, which is that you don't always need to have a plan to be successful. You go where your heart and your values take you, and you are a woman that embodies the values that she speaks of. But also, and I don't know whether you've observed this, but you followed a pattern where you bring joy to others. So, you know, your career in acting, your service in politics, your writing, you know, it's about bringing good vibes and positivity and joy to the people. And hopefully this iteration as the mayor, you've continued to do that. But we'll explore that a little bit more in a minute. I mean,
I
it's
actually
amazing.
thought you were talking about Alison, Fatima. So
Well,
not
I
a
mean,
guess. She does bring joy everywhere she goes. So
I mean,
I was thinking you were talking about Alison.
well, I mean, it's a nice segue, isn't it? Because we always know when Alison is in the building, because there's just joy that emanates in waves around. Everyone's like, she's here, Alison is in the house. How did Alison end up as the Deputy Mayor of West Yorkshire?
Oh, right. So I'm from Seacroft, but actually I was born in Chapeltown because of tragic circumstances. My sister was killed on Roundy Road. We were all moved on, you know, the whole family to Seacroft. We were one of 3 black families, so it was quite an alien environment. So we learned to be tough, we learned to be gobby, and we learned to fight for justice, because we could see injustice around us everywhere we went. I remember going to school and being told that I was stupid, that I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, and it just made me more determined to prove those doubters wrong and to succeed. I left school. I went to be a dental nurse, of all things. I didn't think that I could go to university. I was in a relationship with a much older man. I look back now and think it shouldn't have been allowed, but anyway, I was, and ended up having two children before I went to university, when my daughter was 2 weeks old and my son was 21 months old. And after that, I didn't really look back, because I was so exhausted and I didn't have a chance to look back. But that's when I started to get the validation, the affirmation, the knowledge that actually I wasn't stupid. I could, if I wanted to put in the work, and I've worked hard ever since, because the rewards that I got through education and achieving in that sphere really gave me the impetus to carry on and fight for justice in whichever realm I was in. I lived in Chapeltown, and I decided I wanted to join the Labour Party. Within 12 months, I'd been selected for Armley. I stood for Chapeltown. I didn't win, but I won in Armley, and then went on to be a councillor there for 29 years. But I had to pay the bills. I left an abusive relationship, 10 years living with domestic violence, and I needed to get out of that relationship, and so decided that I would, you know, I'd get a job. I became a support worker for St Anne's, and within about 10 years, I'd become a chief executive of a mental health charity. So I did those 2 things in parallel. And whilst I was a councillor, I was lucky enough to be on the police authority, working with lots and lots of different chief constables here in West Yorkshire. I went on to then chair the police and crime panel, which was the new governance arrangement in 2012. And then one Easter, I had a week off. I was minding my own business. I had a missed call from Tracy Brabin, and I thought, oh damn, she wants me to go leafleting for her. And I rang her back, and she said, will you be my deputy mayor? And here we are.
I mean, Mayor Brabin is not a person you can say no to easily, and it has nothing to do with the stature of the role of mayor. It is solely down to the personality and passion of the woman. So I'm not surprised she said yes. And she's also clearly very wise, because you've been fabulous. And I've absolutely smashed it since. I mean, going back to sort of what really struck me about both your stories You are clearly very driven and ambitious women. And one of the things that I've always struggled with growing up as a woman from a diverse background, particularly with my Asian, South Asian heritage, was ambition was something that was frowned upon. It was like, as a woman, you shouldn't be ambitious. You know, there's no role for that in your life. You should be only focusing on getting married, having children, and that's about it. But for me personally, that never fulfilled me. What fulfills me, and I love being a mum and I love being a wife, don't get me wrong, I adore them, but it's not enough. What was enough for me was doing something fulfilling that makes my heart sing. And what I'm hearing from both of you is the path that you've taken wherever you've ended up, and they're very different paths if you think about where you are now. What's driven you both is your ambition to do the best for others, but also the values, that you won't compromise on your values. And that's really interesting, because I hear from a lot of women sometimes that is something that they get negative feedback for having drive and ambition. Have you, either of you, experienced that? Alison, have you ever had anyone say that to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, my own mother. I mean, we lost her last year, and I miss her every day. But she wasn't part of the sisterhood. You know, she really was part of that old school. You should be at home ironing your kids' clothes. She really said that to me. Yeah, and I think part of it, actually, looking back now, was a bit of envy, because my mum was a remarkable woman, incredibly clever, could have been anything, but was restricted from those opportunities because she was a child born in the 30s and didn't have any of the opportunities that I was able to have. But actually, when she told me that I was a rubbish mum and that I should be at home looking after my family, that just made me want to do it even more, because I knew that I had the ability to make a difference and improve the situation of other women like me. And I didn't want to be put into a situation where I was one thing when I am many things. We are all, as human beings, and particularly women, we are so many things all of the time. And I wanted to be true to that.
And I think one of the amazing things about your story is, despite some of the challenge that you had, you still continued and you got to where you are. And I think one of the things that I've always struggled with, particularly when I was younger, was that lack of a role model that showed the art of the possible. So Tracy is a role model to my daughter. You're a role model to my daughter, to go, look, you can do this. You can enter a world of politics and succeed and facilitate change. And it's one of the reasons why the Women of West Yorkshire Network, which is going to be launching in October, around the time we hope to launch this podcast, is so important. Because I think some of the bits that you're describing, being able to share your story and being able to show the art of the possible, is what will motivate women and help them keep going when they're experiencing some of that negative rhetoric. I mean, Tracy, as someone who's been instrumental behind the movement of the Women of West Yorkshire and women of the world as well, what was your initial thoughts behind the concept of creating a network? Why did you feel a network was important for you?
It was really important, I think, to see others before you can feel confidence yourself in order to reach. But personally, the women's movement meant so much to me in my political journey. I was at university in my final year, and I was attacked by a stranger in the street who tried to rape me. He went to prison, but honestly, I was really damaged by that. I was isolated. I didn't know why it had happened to me. It really impacted on my relationship with my boyfriend. I didn't want anything to do with him. And I needed support, and I found it in the women's movement, and just opened my eyes to a common experience that's also varied as well. So whilst it's common, there's also so many facets to women's experience. And spending time at Greenham Common, in women-only environments, I just found that safe space, a place to heal, but also to gather my thoughts and gather my strength to go back out into the world. And honestly, that was the turning point for me. So whilst it was a horrendous incident, absolutely horrendous, I'm in a weird way glad it happened, because it was transformative. It was that political rocket fuel, that this happened to me, not because I was wearing a short skirt, not because I was rehearsing my lines whilst I was walking so I looked mad, not because I had long blonde hair, not because, it was because of patriarchy and because of male power. and it just opened my mind, opened my eyes, and made me really curious about what I could do to support others. And certainly everything that has happened that is glorious in my life, whether that has been social housing, so securing my home, whether that was free libraries and a decent library in Bristol down the hill, whether that was, you know, really decent education, opportunity to go to university, you know, all of these amazing things, social security when I was starting out as an actor. And I think, you know, bringing those two together were very motivating. So looking at, you know, young kids on my estate now where my mom still lives, what I want to do is to ensure they have the same life chances. So that's the two, I think the two bits of the rocket fuel that really motivate me is it can't be right that women cannot function because they are afraid, because they are limited in what they can do because of, you know, potential violence. And also, if you're a working class kid, surely you have the right to access every opportunity that anybody else has.
Absolutely. I mean, another thing that has struck me about what we've got in common is that we've all experienced really personally traumatic events, but we've turned those events around as things that have motivated us to make positive change and look at the change that we're able to make. But I think what you're alluding to is the work that you've done with the safer communities, about violence against women, but also recognizing that actually in the workplace right now, in a post-COVID world, there are still people who feel uncomfortable and they need a safe space to go and have conversations about how they feel and how they can work with others to try and address some of the issues that are causing it. I mean, we've just seen in the last couple of weeks the NHS releasing that sexual harassment charter, and the fact that in 2023 we're having to state that women and men should feel comfortable and safe within the workplace is a really sad thing. I think it's positive it's happened, but should it have happened? Why do we need these things? But moving on to the positive movement that is, you know, Women of West Yorkshire, I think the other thing that is really important is about creating that social movement of women that can sponsor each other and encourage each other into those high levels of influence to make positive change happen. And I think one of the things that I've really, really benefited from is having mentors or people advocating and sharing with me things about how to survive in sometimes very male-dominated environments. I remember one of the first ever board meetings I went to. I was the only woman in the room. I was probably the youngest woman in the room. I was certainly the only woman from a racially marginalised community. And this white older gentleman came up to me and asked me to make him a cup of coffee. And I'm sure you can both guess what my response was to that. But it just goes to show that, you know, these environments need to change. And it's only when we have representation in those rooms and we start to change culture and behaviours that will make that happen. Why do you think it's important for us to talk about patriarchy, Tracy? Because you mentioned patriarchy, you mentioned the importance as women feeling safe and comfortable to thrive within the environment. Why do you think it's important? What advantage, if I was doing an elevator pitch to an employer about why it's important, what would you say?
Because if you don't recognise the historic impact of patriarchy, you will never improve your business. So from an economic point of view, the most diverse boards of businesses, those businesses are more resilient to shocks, they're more productive, you have greater retention of staff. And it's one of the things that I'm proud of in the first 2 years here, that our workforce looks different now to when I arrived, and hopefully will continue to evolve. Patriarchy holds us back, as does racism, holds us back from achieving our potential. And it's something that we can deal with. We can end this in our organisation if we are in charge. We can make sure it's a priority. Obviously, we can't tackle everything in the world, but within our own organisation, we can set the boundaries.
Absolutely. And Alison, as a lady who I know can hold her own, if someone asked you the same question, what would you say?
I think it's important, first of all, to say that patriarchy doesn't, when we talk about patriarchy, we're not saying that every man is a sexist pest who is misogynistic and hates women. We're not saying that at all. In fact, quite the reverse. It's about recognising that historically men have been given more advantages. There's been a lot of power bestowed on men that has not been shared with women, and that has put us in a situation where men have now got a duty, I think, an obligation to share, to be friends, allies, mentors to women and girls in their lives, to properly even up the playing field, because we are further behind where we should be because of the historic society that we came from. And that's not men's fault today, unless they want to keep us back in that historic society and they don't want to change. Because if that's the case, then they're part of the problem, and the problem will persist. So I think that it's about celebrating the fact that we've got a lot of brilliant men who understand that they've got a job to do to help us to be able to succeed alongside them. But if they're not prepared to do it, then we'll do it on our own.
Absolutely. And in that vein, sometimes some of the strongest women have got a very, very solid bloke behind them. And I'm one of them. I mean, I'm really fortunate to have an incredible husband that facilitates, enables me to do what I do every single day. Because actually, it isn't just about the whole fronting it and advocating for women. It's the small things like picking up the kids from school and sorting dinner out and doing the laundry, or going, don't worry about that, I'll sort it. Sometimes some of the most successful women that I've spoken to have shared with me that their enablers have been small practical interventions that enable them to get a work-life blend. Do you have a work-life blend, Alison?
No. No, I mean, I do have a very loving family, but I'm the enabler for them, and I haven't yet got to a position where they're enabling for me, except my sisters give me lots of love and support. And when my kids were little, they did let me do what I needed to do by looking after my children. But I have to say, that's a bit of a gap in my life that I'm trying to to bring some order. I do need to have a bit more work-life balance, so I'm working on it.
The reason why I asked that particular question was during COVID in particular, I did a video where I just did a sort of selfie video about how tired I was and how unable I was to continue the sort of hero style leadership of just fronting it and going, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm just going to keep going, everything is okay. And the response I got to that video, particularly from women, about thank God someone has acknowledged how exhausted we are, but also facilitated a way for us to acknowledge that in a positive way, because it's okay to not be okay. But equally, we don't need people to be strong all the time. Sometimes our superpower as female leaders is about demonstrating that empathy, that self-awareness, and that compassion. So when we are talking about work-life blend, it's not about going, well, you know, I'm good at this or I'm not good at that. It's about recognizing to do these very senior, strategic, and sometimes really stressful and emotionally loaded jobs. We need to balance many different attributes, and that requires a different leadership that we as women are really good at, I think. I mean, what are your thoughts? As one of the most instrumental CEOs I've ever met, I still remember our first meeting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that I mean, I think I'm very good at being vulnerable. I think I'm very good at being honest about how I'm feeling. I'm not good about finding places in my life where I can just have 5 minutes where I can ask for help. I'm not good at that. But what I am good at in a work environment is about telling people when I've had a bad day, is talking about my mental health. I'm very open about my depression and my anxiety. I'm very open about my lived experience of trauma as a child. And I feel safe doing that, and I want to do that because not only does it help me to locate myself in the place that I'm in and give people that context about me, but it also means that other people can feel safe and share their stuff with me, and then we start to create a culture that is safe for everybody, a psychologically safe culture for everybody. And I need that to thrive. I need that, and so I am creating an opportunity for myself to be safe and to be able to continue the work that I'm doing. But I do need to get better at just taking a bit of time out and giving me a bit of space. I'm planning on doing it. I just haven't started yet.
I'm going to keep you to that because this is being recorded. I don't know whether you realised, but this conversation is being recorded. Tracy, as somebody that has a job with great responsibility. Self-care is really important. And what do you do in regards to self-care?
Yeah, well, I must say I'm a little bit like Alison in that it doesn't feel like a priority. I think the fact that my girls have grown up, they're young adults now, gives me more space to do my job, and I do absolutely love this role, and I'm really cherishing every moment. But like you said, it is full on, and there are days which are absolutely rubbish. For me, I find running really helpful to clear the head. So and it's very, democratic. You just have to have a pair of trainers and you can go when you want outside your house. You don't have to go anywhere or drive anywhere. The only issue is, as always, I signed up for the Rob Borough half marathon, which was something that was incredibly challenging because I'm just a jogger. Half marathon was going to be a real challenge and I needed to train. But at night, on my own, in the dark, running, I'd be making choices that I can't train tonight because I've got home too late to go running. This is so rubbish. And that's why I was really pleased that we could commission the Safer Parks research, because it cannot be right that 50% of the population cannot just go about their business and their hobbies or their self-care because they're afraid of being harmed. Fellas just go home, put the trains on, don't often think about it. Colleagues will come back. We're all in a group talking about our training, and a colleague will come back and say, "Oh yeah, I just ran by the canal last night. It was really good." I'm like, "By the canal at 9 o'clock? Are you mad?"
Yeah.
Having to make these choices was just frustrating, and understanding that as boys and girls grow up, that a girl's life closes down to her bedroom while a boy's life opens up to the park and sports and all of that. So, self-care is something that's really important, but we should also be able to feel confident and at ease going about that self-care.
I'm very similar to you. I don't run, but I like to walk. I had to modify my walks depending on the time of day. And in certain periods of the year, particularly in winter, I couldn't go for a walk after work because I didn't feel safe. And I lived next to a public park. And one of the saddest conversations I ever had with my daughter was giving her practical instructions about when it's dark, what streets to go down. If they're not well lit, don't do it, go longer, take the long route. Just basic things like that we have to teach our young women, when actually there are practical things we can do. And I remember the conference that I went to, Tracy, when I first started this job, about the role of how we design parks and streets and cities and places where we live that don't consider the needs of women because they're designed by men, and it just doesn't occur to them. So absolutely, a lot of the work that you're doing and the work of the combined authority with local government is really important in influencing some practical interventions that would really benefit women in ways that we don't even think about.
Just on that point, Fatima, big shout out to Al Garthwaite, who was really instrumental in Reclaim the Night marches back in the 80s. And, if we flood the streets with women, we will feel safer because there will be more women in the streets. So, this conversation, the solution, won't be around the corner. But I think the more we are present in the evenings on the streets, the more we can reassure each other.
And maybe something that the Women of West Yorkshire Network can start to think about together. Alison, were you going to say, you look like you're about to say something?
No, just to remind us though that our fears are not misplaced, that there have been murders of women, and just taking their rightful place in parks, in public spaces, and the fear is real, isn't it? Sabina Nessa was in a park when she was murdered, and Sarah Everard had just walked through a park when she was picked up by her murderer. So the reality, the sad reality for us women is that we're not being hysterical. This is real.
Absolutely not. But what's so positive is that we've got women in positions of influences where they're using that privilege to make change happen. And Alison, part of the work that you've led on is about the trauma-informed work that you've been doing with West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership, and about linking that to the world of health and how we can support people in ways that we wouldn't have even thought about 5 years ago when it comes to trauma-informed therapies. So we
and
are getting
wider
there.
into the criminal justice system, because the whole system needs to understand that the impact of trauma is a key part of the criminal justice system, and that's why it's part of the Mayor's Police and Crime Plan, because we need to have compassion in the system as well as the big stick.
Absolutely. And as you know, I'm very much a carrot rather than a stick person. Moving on to sort of how we move forward with the Women of West Yorkshire Network, because this vision that you had in particular, Tracy, and then I've clearly jumped on the bandwagon now as your inclusivity champion, it's got the aspiration to do so much, hasn't it? And there are so many women that I've spoken to when we've talked about this as a concept, young women in particular, that really, really want to support it because they think it's something that will support them on their journey as they begin in the world of work or in university. If you were going to talk back to your 19, 20-year-old self, is there anything in particular that Mayor Brabin would have wished the young Tracy Brabin knew?
That your background is your superpower, and I was always embarrassed that I was working class with a thick Yorkshire accent, and actually people were very keen to get people like me around that table, and I didn't realize it. I always was trying to fix myself, put myself in the right, this round peg in their square hole.
Yeah.
And actually, to be my authentic self would have been, and be confident in my authentic self, would have saved me a whole load of heartache.
Absolutely. And Alison, would there be anything that you wish you'd told yourself when you started uni with that 2-week-old baby?
Oh, I was too tired. But I think the message to myself was to forgive myself. I think that we beat ourselves up so much. We hold ourselves to a higher standard than we hold our friends and our family to. We're really forgiving of those around us, and we don't forgive ourselves. And sometimes we beat ourselves up and we stop living the lives we're supposed to be living. So forgive yourself, move on. You only live once. So live the life you're supposed to live. Yes, modify, learn from those mistakes. Don't be arrogant, but don't let that define you, because the person you become as a result of learning from that episode, that's what defines you.
And sort of the final thing that I'd like to sort of pick your brains about as two incredible ladies with amazing lived experiences, and you reflected on this a little bit, particularly you, Alison, and a little bit as well, Tracy, was the role of men in your life and how allyship has really supported you on your journey. And I've really benefited from some incredible men in my life, personally and professionally, that have sponsored me, that have advocated, that created opportunities for me. I'm hoping a lot of men will listen to this conversation. And if they were, Alison in particular, is there anything that you would like to give them in regards to practical tips or advice to sort of galvanise them to support our Women of West Yorkshire Network too?
Yeah, I think men don't always understand how powerful they are. And when we're in a setting with people who are maybe not giving us a voice, not listening to us, they can step in and say, oh, Alison was just about to say something there. Let's hear her. They then create the permission in that room. I'm not saying that I don't create permission for myself, because I'm nearly 60 now and I've learned how to do it. But when I was in my 20s, I was really intimidated by that. I allowed people to silence me, and I think that's a role where some men can be allies and make that space for other voices to be heard, and that would have been really, really helpful 40 odd years ago. So please think about, how do you make spaces for other voices to be heard in those rooms?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Alison said. Men are our allies. They're part of the solution. They're our friends. They're our lovers. They're our nephews and brothers. They're very much part of our lives and part of the story. And there've been many men in my life that have been supportive. My fella, who we've been together nearly 30 plus years, he's seen me go on an extraordinary journey, from being quite a giddy, young actor, you know, not sure what's going on, to taking a very senior role and it's changed my personality to quite a degree. He's had to really flex and take, you know, an equal share in childcare and so on. So, you know, the men in our lives have been really valuable. But I always reflect that when I go to big meetings where there's somebody on stage and then there's questions from the audience, if a woman asks the first question, other women will ask a question. If it's a man, a woman will maybe right at the end when people are packing up to go say, oh, I've got a question. I think it's really helpful if men allow women to ask questions, to give them space rather than jumping in, and also to be curious. I remember working with a colleague really senior in the organization, and he's not in police and crime, but he said, I was really interested in the work that you and Alison were doing on safety of women and girls. So I went home and I asked my wife, is this how you feel when you're thinking about going out for exercise or you're out in the street? She said, my God, let me tell you how I feel. And he said, I had absolutely no clue that it was an experience that my wife also, because she's middle class and, you know, well off and blah, 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 that she experienced it in the same way. So I think if men could be curious in this space, that would also be helpful.
No, really, really good advice. So, I mean, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. You know, one of the takeaways that I will always get from talking to you both is the art of the possible, and just, you know, never assume that just because things are the way they are, that they have to be that way, that we all have the power and the skills to make positive change happen, that we should always, always harness our superpowers. So the things that make us who we are, the different facets that make us individuals, are actually things that make us unique. And instead of being embarrassed by them, we should harness them. So, you know, I come in and out of this office, Tracy. Don't know how my still welcome is because it's very comfortable in the heat wave we're having at the moment. And that's something that I'm embracing, my authenticity, my heritage, and we should encourage other people, no matter what makes them who they are, to embrace the same. And we can use our influence to make that happen. But the one thing that I really think is an important message to anyone listening to this, and we started it in the beginning of this conversation from both your stories, is where you start does not mean that's where you're going to end. From your stories, it just goes to show that the art of the possible is there. You don't need to have a plan. You just need to have belief in yourself, strength and tenacity, and the world is your oyster. And that is why the Women of West Yorkshire Network is going to be absolutely epic. Thank you so much. My name is Fatima Khan, and this has been the first episode of the Can You See Me podcast. Thank you so much, Mayor Brabin, and thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Lowe.